Esquire, and welcome to Public Safety Network at Home, the latest episode. I'm here with my good friend and colleague, TJ Kennedy. Hey, TJ.
How are you, Jason?
All right, doing well. So we are super honored today to have two extremely honored and accomplished guests with us from locally here in Arlington County, Virginia. We've got Chief Dave Pavlitz, who is the fire chief in Arlington, and Chief Jay Farr, who is the police chief in Arlington. And they both have, we could take pretty much the whole segment to go into the amazing backgrounds and experience that they have across public safety. I know that Chief Pavlitz has spent about 22 years in Anne Arundel County, moved to Alexandria for some period of time, and then has now taken over Arlington. And I know, Chief Farr, you've been with Arlington for quite a big chunk of your career. I mean, since you were in the Naval Service, I guess, quite some time ago. And thank you for your service there, as well as what you're doing today. And has taken over the chief spot in Arlington County about 5 years ago, I guess, back in 2015.
Correct.
So phenomenal guest today. I want to welcome you both and thank you for your time. What we really want to get into today and why we have these two esteemed guests is to talk about how police, fire, other agencies effectively work together on various programs, both day-to-day operationally and in terms of emergency or other type of specialized response. These two in particular, I have worked together for some time. They have a great relationship, and really want to turn it over to both of you to kind of dive into some of the initiatives that you have engaged in together, and give our audience a little bit of idea of the kinds of things you're working on together and how to make those interagency coordination successful. TJ, anything to add on that?
No, I mean, I'll just proffer going into it that I think it's really important for public safety, around the world to understand and to benefit from great working relationships between law enforcement, fire, and emergency medical services. And I think what's happening in Arlington County is spectacular. I think that some of the programs that have been put in place don't just build short-term success, but they build long-term success, because it's actually the training together, it's the education together, it's the working together on all of the little things that make you prepared as a community for the big things to happen. And when that happens, if you work together very well every single day, it's going to make those bigger events go seamlessly. And I think that's important for us to hear about today.
Great. Well, I don't know who wants to dive in first, but would love to kind of hear about, some of the initiatives you're working on, and we'll go from there.
Dave, you mind if I give a little quick background?
Please do.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Please.
So I'll keep it fairly short because I know, for time, but I want to go back just a hair to really help set where we are today. I had a deputy chief named Steve Hall back in the early 90s, who really was a proponent of the incident management system and incident command and how that might work. And if you know, law enforcement in particular is not necessarily as structured in the incident command as police, as fire has been forever. But Steve was sort of ahead of the game there and really got us thinking about that. And so if you ever read the reports that came out of post 9/11, the response to the Arlington County Police Department and the fire department were extremely collaborative and I think really well thought out and organized, because we had been introduced into that system as well as being able to work with the fire department. And that was sort of the beginning of us starting to see, like, here's a real value to this. It really benefited us. I'm not saying we didn't have good relationships with the fire department before, but we didn't integrate quite as tightly until after 9/11. Then thereafter, it's been a real, a growing trend for us in the last 20 years to build upon some of those foundations. So I think I'd be remiss not to give a little credit to the guy that brought that and really got the police department on that side. And the only other thing I'd say about that I think is very important is we struggled a little bit for a while about the whole incident command structure and how the fire department is much more definitive in what they do. And initially there was some kind of push to make the police be exactly like the fire department, that we do the programs the exact same way. And then I think a turning point for us when we came to the understanding is, look, we have an objective to meet. Both of us have the same objective to meet. And how we meet that objective doesn't have to be exactly the same, as long as we each bring the components to the table that work successfully. And by having a little flexibility in that conversation and a little flexibility about how we operate, I think has really benefited us.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to build on that. I'm relatively new, but from what I've seen, two distinct departments have very storied histories and a great, a huge amount of accomplishment. But the approach, just like I think you stated earlier, everything is kind of tackled from a public safety lens. And the communication, the coordination between all levels within the department and overall the umbrella from county government just supports community resilience, community safety, and that two departments come together on so many initiatives and so many issues. It just kind of bleeds down to the street operations where everyone is in sync. Everyone does understand the common operating needs, and everyone does understand their roles. And from the operations, some of the complex operations we've seen recently from active violence incidents, the application of unified command, the communications, the integrated communications. It's been great through several years, and it's just getting better and better over time. Probably, I'm going to say 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, there was an initiative to pretty much bring a cross-functional team between the police department and fire department called the High Threat Program, supported by first some regional and also federal grant dollars, but also very stressed in the participation for both agencies, have several personnel from both departments that do work on a lot of the common operating issues that we'll face, from making sure the intelligence that is shared is vetted and privileged and appropriate for each organization, to developing some of the programs that deal with a lot of the novel hazards we are facing, from active violence incidents to fire as a weapon, to trying to bring, having that what next perspective, bringing everybody together, bringing the specialists, bringing the subject matter experts in, developing the common training programs that can flow through both departments, and then bringing both departments back to train on it, just makes our readiness and makes our safety and makes our operations in the field almost go seamless. It's pretty elegant.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. I mean, and you mentioned something, Chief, and I know you've had a very successful collaboration on active shooter for some time. Can you tell us a little bit about that program and, how you all are working together? Obviously, this has been a issue for the whole country, for a long time. It's getting worse and worse. Maybe a little reprieve now here during the pandemic, but certainly an issue that we continue to grapple with. And so that coordination is really critical.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I'm going to touch upon sort of the police side, and then Dave, if you really get into how we've really integrated the medical, because that was a key point to make this thing work. But after Columbine, the police department, not just police department, I think every agency realized the day of setting up a perimeter and waiting to go in while people were, bleeding and dying out was not going to work anymore, and we had to think of better ways to approach that. And so a couple of the programs, I'm going to talk a little bit about the AVI, and then Dave and talk a little bit about the Medical Rescue Task Force. The AVI protocols we set in place here, I think, are pretty unique. I don't know how many agencies around the country do this, but we got an agreement with all of our Northern Virginia partners through the compacts through Northern Virginia that if I am having an active violence event, I can, at this point in time, go to our ECC and activate what we call that AVI, the Accident Violent Incident. And pretty much without question, our partner agencies, Fairfax, Loudoun County, City of Alexandria, et cetera, have committed to giving us a supervisor in 5, no questions asked. They get immediate deployment to a staging area. They are then able to provide a tremendous amount of support that we may or may not have. It allows the primary agency to focus on the incident at hand. So let's say I've got a shooting at the mall, but it creates immediate backup for us without having to go through long discussions about who you're going to send, how many you're going to send, when you're going to send. Everybody agrees if you call and this protocol goes out and it's through the Northern Virginia region with our emergency communication staff and with our agreement, we will send the bodies to you to support. And so, for the police side, I can have a really horrific event going, but I also have a little bit of confidence knowing that I push that button, I'm going to have 30, 40, 50 assets on their way to me immediately, and we'll sort it out when we sort it out. That lends itself into the part that I'd have Dave talk, which we've worked really hard to work with the fire department to get them to a comfort level that we can get them into a little bit warmer zone than we would have traditionally. So Dave, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So from the tactical equipment, from the practices, from the training, working with for these rapid deploying task force and active violence incidents, it's been kind of refining and just making it better and making it simpler over the last several years. So the training, the reps, the interactive medical training that we both use to make sure from at least the fire rescue EMS side, we have force protection. We understand our roles and we know where to be and where to go. And once we get clearance and have that communication within the unified command to make sure the tactical side we're safe and we can deploy, that's been, that's progressed over the years. But one of the benefits we've seen just from this constant drill and constant interaction and constant training is that the level of medical assessment and the level of medical care that law enforcement patrol officers do during active violence incidents and also any trauma incident is pretty incredible. We've had many, many positive patient outcomes where the patrol officers get there first, assess, can apply tourniquets, can do critical life-saving care before we arrive, or we're 30, 60 to 120 seconds out. But we often arrive on scene and see some of their initial medical care makes a huge difference, makes it so much easier to treat the patient, and they're really having much better outcomes and leaving the hospital in much better shape. So, that's a joint initiative, but also to law enforcement's credit, where they've really taken to this kind of a new discipline, new approach, and they've really, really applied it at all times, at all conditions.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I know that we've seen a real uptick in our ability to handle some of these things that we would not have touched before.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that we can just take a team, it's a little hard right now during the COVID-19, but it's not uncommon for us to, without notice, a no notice drill, call up a couple officers and a couple firefighters and say, we've just had X happen at this location, let's take care of it. And we do that over and over again to reinforce that constant teamwork and to build confidence between the police and the firefighters so that they can work in concert with each other. And we've definitely seen a very positive response to this over the last few years.
Yes.
Chief Fire, that last point you made, I think is just so critical, and it's to train together, and to call it out like it's a real incident, and have folks on duty, respond to that like they would, and to build that confidence together. And this goes a lot with what Chief Bob said earlier, where the amount of medical care, let's say immediate medical care in that 30, 60, 120 seconds before fire EMS may arrive on scene has improved, and that there's more comfort in those officers doing that particular role. As if to the same point for the fire department, there's more comfort with them trusting the tactical operations on the law enforcement side to bring them into that warmer zone of an active violence incident, and to be a part of being right behind or right next to those officers that might be leading that entry or doing other things. And I think as somebody who was a tactical paramedic back in the 90s, I've seen how far we've come, and it's come such a long way to have a fully integrated operation that trains together, that practices together, and then honestly is dealing with these incidents far more often than we used to, but in a much better way. And I think a lot of agencies can learn from that.
One of you talked a little bit earlier about how we can provide things that might be beneficial. I can tell you one thing that really helped sort of break the ice. It's been a while now, but we still do it with every recruit class that comes out. We do a police and fire 101. So we go to the fire side, to their academy, and we do a police 101. This is what we do. This is why we do it. Here's our command structure, and lay it all out. The fire department does the same thing for us. They come back in. They tell us how their structure works, why they put those trucks all over the road, how far back they need us, who the guy is in the white hat. And what it really does, though, it helps us understand each other's perspective and why we do what we do. And that's a fundamental building block to creating a relationship between the two agencies. If they know why the other one does it, it's a lot easier than to say, okay, we need to adjust our protocols or our response because the fire guys are going to do X. And I think that's been really valuable.
And our experts have also taken it to kind of the next level, always thinking about what's next, what's the next threat, what could actually, what could manifest. So there's between departments and also within the Northern Virginia region, there's an exploratory on how do we manage from a tactical operations perspective, fire as a weapon. What if someone barricades or starts to light off the building, or if there's some kind of a trap, if there's harm to first responders, how do we protect law enforcement with tactical entry and trying to clear the scene? How do we interact in this another environmental threat? how do we, perform and function? So between, modified personal protective equipment, trying to make sure we have the right respiratory protection, we're starting to have those discussions on, how can we protect each other and how can we operate and also engage when you add that element in. We've run some experiments on deploying hose lines within the armored vehicles and trying to push forward and get, better positioning. So all of that, certainly under development, but these are some of the things we're exploring in the future. But it just goes to the credit. We just have some very forward-thinking experts on both sides of the department. You put both of them together and we get some really good, effective programs.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, that's phenomenal. I mean, that's the kind of thing, I know that we really love to hear. I can tell you that, TJ and I have traveled the country, and just this last year we were in, no names to be named, but in a large metropolitan city where the fire service and the police service, let's just say that their relationship doesn't look anything like what you've described here. So, we know this isn't the case everywhere. As you're giving advice and talking about your experiences, for those who are looking to kind of break down those barriers, some historical barriers and differences in the disciplines, what's your recommendation? I mean, I get it if everyone's already on the same page and, then taking it to the next level, but how do you even kind of open that discussion and start to get that collaboration that really is proving so successful?
Well, I mean, I look back sort of over time. I mean, I can tell you one of the things I did that I was really wondering how it would play out, but we still do it today about, I don't know, it's going on maybe 10 years ago now. Think about this. A lot of times I think some agencies don't get along because they're all fighting for the same, they're all fighting for money, right? Budgets can be one of the points where people really get contentious. I had a brilliant idea a while back. So you know what? How about we get the police, the fire, the sheriff, and the OEM, which is our ECC, and we collectively sit down and talk about what we're going to do for the next budget cycle when it comes to capital projects, mostly on technology, but where are we going to invest time and money? And to my real relief, everyone showed up at the table, and everyone understood that everyone can't have everything the first year. But if we work through it collectively and work on our timelines, we can actually work through a long-term capital project that we can share what we get. And I can tell you, you are so much more successful when you go across the street to the county board office as a team, not as 4 individuals, say, this is what we all agree needs to be done. I've been amazed at the success we've had and how cooperative every one of the agencies have been in understanding where the priorities at any given time. So, I mean, that's how you build some real trust in that mid-level command staff area. I think at the lower level is what Dave was talking about when you get those teams together and they work together. So if I have an officer today who's working with a firefighter today on a lot of these tactical exercises and they agree, somewhere down the road, they're going to be a sergeant and a lieutenant and a captain, and they're going to continue moving us forward because they trust each other. And trust is really the fundamental thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm going to say that trust and that communication, that's been developed over many, many years from very forward-thinking chiefs in both departments and also county administrators. I'm probably going to say they kind of saw what was coming down the tracks, and they've kind of pushed, and well, first off, push away from the desk, start getting everyone around associated, find these initiatives, find these programs. It could be on the administrative side, from the budget and from administrative and finance to, get these focused on public safety initiatives out in the community. And, we're much stronger together than we are separate. And just from, also down to the street level, we'll have, police offices in our fire stations. We'll have drug collection boxes in our fire stations. We're all doing everything we possibly can to invite, commingle, make sure everyone just kind of, associates in non-emergency conditions. And that just, we see the quality in the street all the time. The operations definitely benefit from that, day one interaction. It's just kind of with you as you progress through your career and you start to get into management, you start to get into administration. And it's just a given. You just know, these are your public safety partners. And it just carries forward.
I think all great points for any agency to benefit from. I think a couple of highlights in there is certainly tying the sharing of knowledge to understanding, and understanding becomes cooperation. And I think that all of the interactions all seem to be driving around that openness, that transparency between law enforcement and fire and EMS, and having that ability to share why they're doing something and how they're doing something and how they can make it better for each other is probably a key baseline understanding. Chief Farr, I think your point on budget and the fact that a lot of times the interagency issues come up over arguing over budget versus, say, working together to create a good long-term plan, a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, and doing that around the same table in an open, collaborative sort of way is going to create much better results. I think that's amazingly good advice.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. We don't always agree, Dave, do we? But the beauty is he may have a program, and I'm worried about assets or how much I'm going to put to it. But at the end of the day, I think he's absolutely right. It's not about me and it's not about him. It's like, what is the objective we're trying to meet? And more often than not, we can always find common ground to get there. And so you're on the money. We're actually sharing the police command vehicle right now because I had to take and put our command vehicle, we took that out of service with the anticipation we're going to put a new one in next year. That may get delayed a year. Sorry, Dave, we may be a little longer, but we came to the point where we agreed to use the same primary command vehicle and deploy it as we need it. They were willing to train our staff and get people out there. And then again, it's just because at the end of the day, what's the objective we're trying to meet for our community? And I think everybody here gets it.
And I have to say, I've said before, I'm going to keep saying thank you to Chief Farr. I know from the capital side, personal services side, chunks of his budget came over to benefit the fire department, and we'll return the favor. So again, dollars in a ledger and what department it's under, that's kind of starting to fade away a little bit. It really is underneath the cause and underneath the justification of public safety.
Just phenomenal what you all are describing. I mean, that kind of collaboration is what we need, today for a lot of reasons, I think in terms of what's going on in society and what we're dealing with the pandemic. And it's critical that all our public safety professionals, I think, collaborate and work together for the best possible outcomes. So with that, I want to thank you both tremendously for your service and for the great work you're doing in Arlington County working together. Again, my name is Jason Karp. This is TJ Kennedy. And that's it for this episode of PSN at Home. Thanks all. See you next time.
Our pleasure.
Thank you, Jason and TJ.
Thank you both.